Hey there. Tonight, you're not stepping into a castle. There's no sword at your side, no warm hearth waiting for you, no feast laid out on a long wooden table. Tonight, you're waking up cold, hungry, bone-tired, because tonight, you're a medieval peasant. And survival, it isn't guaranteed. This isn't the kind of history they put in gilded books. It's the kind scratched into scars, whispered through cracked teeth and buried in shallow graves. It's what life felt like for most people, ordinary people, people like you. Every single day was a battle against hunger, against cold, against your own body breaking down, against lords, taxes, plague, storms, insects, war, famine, death. In this story, there's no rise to glory, no chosen one, just the struggle to last through the week. And tonight, you'll feel all of it. We're going to walk through 17 brutal, shocking struggles that peasants faced every day in the Middle Ages. The kinds of things that didn't get written down, but should have, because they made up most of human life for a very, very long time. If this kind of slow, immersive storytelling helps you drift off, or just keeps your mind company for a little while, feel free to like the video, maybe subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Something about watching people from all around the world fall asleep together. It's strangely comforting. Now dim the lights, pull the blanket closer, and imagine waking up in a world where there's no comfort, no safety net, and no one coming to save you. Your first struggle starts now. The hunger that never left you, wake up hungry. But that's nothing new. You went to bed hungry too, and yesterday, and the day before that. You can't remember the last time you felt full, not truly. You dream about bread, thick crust, warm center, but dreams don't fill your belly. Outside, the frost clings to the thatch and your breath curls like smoke. You reach for what's left of yesterday's barley mash, thin, grey, sour. You scrape it from the sides of a wooden bowl that's more splinter than dish now. You eat slowly, not for enjoyment, but to stretch the moment. There will be no meat today. There was none yesterday either. You only get meat during feasts. If you're lucky, maybe a scrap of salted pork or stringy rabbit if your father traps one. But the church takes its share. So does the Lord. And what's left isn't much. You shuffle to the lean-to where the root cellar sits half sunk in the mud. Turnips. Again. Maybe a sprouting onion. Your fingers tremble with cold as you dig through the basket. Some of the vegetables are soft. One reeks of rot. But you eat what you can. There's no waste when your ribs show. In summer, there's more. Barley gruel, oatcakes, cabbage stew. But it never lasts. By winter, the stores shrink. You go without. And when the crops fail, when the rain drowns the wheat or the sun burns it dry, you pray. You've seen hunger turn people. A neighbor who once shared her broth now steals it. Children with hollow eyes. A mother who buried her newborn because she couldn't feed it. You saw her leave the body in the woods, wrapped in cloth. The wolves found it before the priest. You told no one, because you understood. Hunger isn't just about the stomach, it claws at your mind, it makes you forget names, faces, how to feel joy. You tried chewing bark once, just to stop the cramps. You tried drinking too much water. It only made it worse. Today you go to the Lord's field to gather fallen grain after the harvest. Gleaning, they call it. But it feels more like begging. You crouch in the mud, fingers numb, picking through chaff and droppings. A guard watches. If you take too much, he'll beat you. You gather enough to make porridge. You'll eat tonight. But even as you do, you'll already be thinking of tomorrow, because the hunger doesn't stop. It waits, quietly, patiently, like it knows you'll always come back to it. The winter that wouldn't end. You can feel it before you open your eyes. The weight of the cold. It presses against your chest, seeps into your bones, curls around your fingers and toes like frostbitten vines. You pull the thin wool blanket tighter, but it's stiff with damp, and the wind finds its way through the holes in the thatch above you anyway. You don't want to move, but you have to, because if you don't, the cold wins. Your feet hit the dirt floor and the pain is instant, like stepping onto ice. The hearth is out. It always is by morning. There's no firewood left. You burned it all in November, then the dried dung, then the broken stool, then the thatch pulled from the animal shed. Now, you don't know. Outside the world is grey, not the soft grey of fog, but the lifeless kind that turns everything to ash. Snow lies in dirty clumps. The well is frozen over. You break the ice with a rock just to fill the bucket. Your hands bleed. You're not even through the worst yet. The winter has lasted longer than it should. The stores are gone. The rats have eaten what was left of the rye. The salted fish spoiled weeks ago. Your neighbour boiled leather straps yesterday, hoping to suck something, anything from them. You smell smoke from the manor house in the distance. The Lord still has wood. The Lord still eats meat. But you won't see any of it, not unless you steal. And if you steal, you hang. You wrap rags around your feet, tying them with frayed rope. You can't feel your toes. That might be good news, or it might be the beginning of rot. The animals fare no better. One of the goats froze standing up last night, its eyes still open. You drag it behind the shed before the children wake. You'll try to butcher it later. The meat might be good, or it might be full of sickness. Either way, it will have to do. Your wife coughs again from the bed. She hasn't stood in 3 days. The baby sleeps against her chest, too quiet. You place a hand on the child's back, searching for warmth. There's little. You don't cry. You don't even sigh. There's no breath to waste. Instead, you step back outside, into the wind, into the silence, and hope the sun might break through today. Even for an hour, even for a moment, because this winter feels like it might never end. And if it doesn't, neither will the dying. The endless taxes. You thought today might be quiet, just for once. Maybe you'd patch the roof, mend your boots, sit in the sun, if it ever shows its face again. But then the rider comes. You hear his hooves before you see the cloak. Red and gold, the Lord's colours. He doesn't dismount. He doesn't speak your name. He doesn't have to. You already know why he's here. It's tax day. You clench your jaw and wipe your hands on your tunic, the same one you've worn all season. You offer a nod, a show of respect, or submission. There's no difference anymore. The rider unrolls a scroll, parchment thick as tree bark, with ink that smells of iron and judgment. He reads your name, your holding, your obligations. You owe grain, eggs, 1 piglet, 4 bundles of flax, and coin. Always coin, though you barely touch it. You try to explain. The crop failed, the sow miscarried, the flax didn't grow, but he doesn't look up. He just waits, gloved hand resting near his belt, where a short sword hangs. You pay what you can, from the sack hidden beneath the floorboards, from the last basket of barley you swore you'd save for seed. He takes it, marks your name, then moves on. But you know what's coming next. The church, because the tithe collector always comes after the Lord's man. And God apparently needs his share too. Another 1/10 of what you barely had, and no excuses, Because this tax isn't just law, it's salvation, or so they say. You've heard of excommunication over a missed tithe. One man was denied burial. They left him on the edge of the forest for wolves to decide his fate. You remember that smell. It lingered longer than the flowers on your wife's grave. The worst part? No one even knows where the taxes go. The grain gets carted off to the Lord's stores. The flax becomes linen worn by hands that never touch dirt. The coins vanish into pouches you'll never see again. You're left with nothing, but they never leave you alone. And if you're late, if you protest, there's punishment. Stocks, fines, the whip. You've even seen someone hanged for it. Rope creaking above the village green. Children watching wide-eyed while their parents whispered, "He tried to keep what was his." You don't want to be next, so you give what you have. And tomorrow you'll start over, with less. Because the taxes never stop, and neither do the hands waiting to take them. The blisters beneath the plough. You're up before the sun. Not because you want to be, but because the ox is already bellowing in the pen and the ploughshare needs to be mended before the earth can be cut. You don't have time to stretch, no time to eat, not even time to check your feet for sores, though you can feel them, raw and splitting beneath the wrappings. You are a ploughman today, and the field does not care how tired you are. It's wet, of course. It always is this time of year. You press your weight against the wooden handles of the plough as the ox trudges forward. The soil resists, thick clay, slick with frost melt. It clings to the blade and your boots and your sole. Your shoulders burn before the first furrow is done. The rhythm is cruel. Step, push, drag, gasp. Over and over. Your hands blister through the gloves. The wood rubs you raw. The leather strap across your back digs in with every jerk of the ox. You curse under your breath. Then you apologize to God, to the land, to no one at all. By mid-morning, you're soaked in mud and sweat. A crow circles overhead, and you wonder if it's waiting for you, or the worms your plough drags into the light. You rest against the fence for a moment, just long enough to let the shaking in your arms settle. But you can't stop long, not with the field still mostly untouched, not with the sky already greying again. If you don't turn this soil, nothing will grow. If nothing grows, your family won't eat, and the Lord won't care why. You've seen what happens to families who fail to meet their quota. You helped build the ditch they were thrown into. You remember the smell, the silence. So you press forward. Every now and then the plough hits something hard, stone, root, bone. You wrench the handle sideways, nearly thrown off your feet. Your back spasms. You bite down on your tongue. Keep going. You've had this same ox for 3 years. His name is Tor. He's old, like you, and slow, like you. But he doesn't complain. He just keeps moving. Sometimes you think he's the only soul who understands. The sun breaks through the clouds for a moment, a trick of light. You think about stopping, but the wind shifts and the chill reminds you. Winter's coming, always, and there's still more earth to break. You lower your head and push, because if you don't, the hunger comes back, and so do the crows. The sickbed without mercy. It starts with a cough, not a deep one, just a scratch, a tickle in the throat. But you know what it means. You've heard it before, in others, and you've seen where it leads. You try to hide it, from your family, from the neighbours, from the priest, because in your world, sickness is more than weakness. It's danger, it's shame, it's a death sentence that doesn't come with mercy or rest. Just a long, slow spiral. By midday, the fever sets in. Your body aches like you've been whipped. Your breath burns, your head swims, but you still have chores. There's water to haul, goats to feed, a leak in the roof that won't fix itself. You do your best. You try not to stagger. You spit into the straw and hope no one sees the blood. There are no doctors here. If you're lucky, someone knows herbs. Boiled bark, crushed root, a charm tied around your wrist. If you're less lucky, they'll call the priest, who'll ask if your soul is clean before he lays hands on you. Your soul? That's the least of your worries. By nightfall, you can't sit upright. You lie on the dirt floor beside the hearth, wrapped in a damp blanket. The straw pokes through it. The rats whisper behind the woodpile. Your wife lights a candle. She doesn't touch you. No one does. Not since last spring, when a coughing took your cousin and his whole family within a week. The village remembers, so they leave you in the corner. They leave a bowl of broth you can't swallow. They whisper as if you can't hear. You can. The days blur. Heat, sweat, shivering. A pounding in your skull that never stops. Sometimes you dream. Sometimes you wake to find the room empty, the door ajar, and no one willing to come in. You don't blame them. In the moments of clarity, you wonder if it's penance for a sin you can't name, for surviving this long when others haven't. The priest does come, eventually. He doesn't step inside. He stands in the doorway, murmuring Latin through cloth. He leaves a sprig of something under your pillow and tells your wife to prepare. Prepare for what? The pit? The fire? Or something worse? You don't know if you'll wake again. You aren't sure you want to, because in a world without medicine, without comfort, without hope, even the sickbed becomes a battlefield, and mercy doesn't come. The justice that wasn't justice. It happens fast. You're mending a fence, minding your own business, when a stranger shouts from the path. He's missing a hen, claims he saw it disappear near your field, says you were nearby. You deny it, of course. You haven't touched a bird all week. You barely have enough grain to feed your own family, let alone fatten a stolen hen. But the reeve doesn't care. He arrives within the hour, flanked by 2 men from the manor. One carries a rope, the other a stick. They don't knock, they don't ask, they tell. You're to be taken before the steward. You try to explain, but your voice sounds too defensive, too desperate. That's always how guilt sounds to the ones who already believe it. By the time you reach the manor, there's a small crowd. Neighbours mostly, curious. Some sympathetic, most not. No one speaks on your behalf. No one dares. The steward doesn't sit in judgment. He looms in it, on a platform with robes and rings. You stand below him, eyes down, knees muddy. He lists the charge, theft of livestock. He reads it like scripture, as if the words themselves weigh more than your life. You don't have a lawyer. That's not how this works. The Lord is the law. His word is final. You speak only when asked. You tell the truth. You hope it's enough. It isn't. There's no proof, but it doesn't matter. The law doesn't require proof for peasants. Just accusation. The word of a landholder holds more weight than your entire family's combined. The verdict is decided before you ever opened your mouth. You're fined a week's worth of grain and 20 lashes. You plead. Not for the lashes, you've survived worse, but for the grain. You have none to spare. The steward shrugs, says if you can't pay, the lashes double. You take the lashes. The men tie your hands to a post. Your shirt is ripped down the back. You brace your teeth against the pain, against the humiliation, against the heat of blood rolling down your sides. The reeve counts aloud. Some laugh. A child cries. You don't, because you can't. When it's over, they cut you down. No healing herbs, no bandages, just mud and silence and stares. You limp home alone. No one follows. No one dares be seen siding with someone judged guilty. And that's the part that burns deepest. Not the whip, not the shame, but the knowing that in this world, truth is just a whisper, and justice belongs to the ones who already have everything. The rot in your teeth. It begins with a throb, not sharp, not sudden, just a dull ache in the back of your jaw. You press your tongue to the molar and wince. There's a small hole now. You taste iron, you taste rot, and you know what's coming. You've seen it before, in others. The swelling, the fevers, the smell. A toothache in this world isn't a nuisance. It's a warning, a sign that something inside you is dying, and no one can stop it. There are no dentists here, no clean tools, no sterile gloves, no numbing agents, just pain. And if you're lucky, a pair of rough hands and a rusty pair of pliers. You keep working, of course. You can't stop for a tooth. You split firewood with one hand pressed to your cheek. You gather nettles while swallowing blood. You smile with your mouth closed, hoping no one notices the puffed side of your face. But they notice. You can't eat without flinching. Even porridge stings. Your sleep comes in fits and starts, broken by stabbing jolts in your jaw. You bite down in your dreams and wake up with blood on your tongue. You try herbs, clove, if someone has it, birch bark, salt rubbed into the gum. Nothing helps. The pain deepens. It spreads. Your head pounds. The side of your neck is sore. You can barely swallow. And then the fever comes. You lie in the dark, sweating through your blanket, breathing through your mouth like a wounded animal. The pain is no longer sharp. It's monstrous. A pressure that feels like your skull is splitting apart from the inside. Your neighbors offer advice, old tales passed down from their grandparents. Let the blacksmith heat a nail and drive it into a tree. Steals the pain. Bite a toad. If it dies, the ache goes with it. Get it pulled, or it'll poison your blood. You choose the last. A man with calloused hands and yellow fingernails visits your home with a leather strap and a curved blade. He says little. You sit on the floor, bite the strap. He leans in. The pain is immediate, violent, searing, then silence, and then more pain. The socket keeps bleeding. The swelling doesn't stop. Infection sets in. You survive, barely. But you'll never forget that ache, that fear, that knowledge that something so small could end you. Because in the Middle Ages, death didn't always wear a sword or ride a horse. Sometimes it came in the quiet, through a hole in your tooth. The children you couldn't save. You hear the cough before you see the fever. At first you think it's just the cold, maybe the smoke from the hearth, maybe the wet clothes. But deep down, you know better. Your youngest, barely old enough to walk, sits slumped against the wall. His eyes are glassy, too tired to cry. His lips are cracked, his breath shallow. You place your hand against his forehead. It burns like the forge. You've seen this before. You've buried this before. There's no doctor to call, no healer you can afford. The old woman who knows herbs is 3 villages away, and the road is mud. You could send someone, but what would they bring back? Nettle tea? Boiled bark? A prayer? Your wife won't stop pacing. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't have to. You both know how this ends. You've already lost 2. One to fever, one to hunger. Small graves by the willow tree marked with stone and string. You visit them in the spring when the flowers bloom, though they don't know the seasons anymore. Now your son joins the list. You sit beside him through the night, holding a damp cloth to his skin, whispering promises you can't keep. You rock him in your arms as if motion might pull him back from the edge. Sometimes he stirs, looks at you, tries to speak. Then the silence returns. You wonder what you did wrong. Was the water bad? Was the stew too thin? Did you leave the window open? Or was it just life? In the morning, the fever breaks, but he doesn't wake. You wait another day, another night. Then you start digging. The earth is frozen, hard as stone. You chip away with a spade dulled by years of digging furrows, not graves. Your hands bleed. You don't stop. You can't. You wrap him in linen, the only clean cloth you have. You press your lips to his forehead, and for a moment, he feels warm again. Just a moment. Then you lower him down. There are no bells, no hymns, just wind, and the sound of your breath catching in your throat. The village doesn't ask what happened. They don't have to. Everyone's buried a child. Everyone carries that shadow. And tomorrow, you'll rise again, feed the animals, patch the roof, because life doesn't stop, not even for the ones too small to survive it. The thirst that made you drink filth. You wake with a tongue like sandpaper and lips cracked wide enough to bleed. It's not just dryness, it's thirst, the kind that settles deep into your ribs, the kind that makes you dizzy before your feet even touch the ground. You rise slowly, your joints creak, your vision blurs. The bucket beside the hearth is empty. Of course it is. You drained the last drop last night, after the baby cried herself hoarse, and your wife begged you to give her yours. You did. Now it's your turn to suffer. You grab the empty pail and step outside. The sun hasn't risen, but the air is already thick. Summer has baked the land for weeks. The well at the center of the village, your well, has dropped so low the rope barely reaches. The water that does come up is cloudy, warm, and stinks faintly of rot. But you drink it anyway. You don't have a choice. You pass the livestock trough on the way. The pigs drink from the same pool they piss in. The chickens step through it, tracking filth across the stones. You consider taking a scoop, but you've seen what it's done to others. The cough, the cramps, the blood. They say it's the water. They say it carries something inside it now. Spirits, maybe. Punishment. Or just the runoff from the Lord's cattle fields. A boy down the road died after drinking from the stream. His mother still washes his shirt every day, hoping it'll come clean. It never does. At the well, there's already a line. Women with jugs, children clutching gourds, eyes sunken. Everyone's waiting in silence. There's no laughter anymore, no gossip, just thirst and the fear of what comes next. When your turn arrives, you lower the bucket slowly, feeling it scrape the stone. You hear it splash. You pull. It comes up heavy. But the smell hits you first. Swampy, metallic, like something dead at the bottom. You hesitate, then drink. It runs down your throat like warm slime. Your stomach churns. You swallow again anyway, because thirst doesn't care about taste. Thirst doesn't care about what might be floating inside. Thirst only cares that it's fed. And when the cramps come later, when your gut twists and your lips turn pale, you'll still wonder, was it the water, or was it just your turn? The fire that took everything. It started with a spark. You didn't see it. You didn't smell it. You only heard the scream. By the time you ran outside, it was already too late. The thatch was lit. Flames crawling fast, faster than your feet across the mud, licking up the side of your neighbour's roof like it had been waiting all winter to do just that. You shouted. Others came. Buckets flew. Water sloshed. But everyone knew it was hopeless, because in a village made of wood and straw, fire doesn't stop. It feeds, it jumps, it roars. Your house was 3 doors down. You had time to grab something, anything. You chose the cradle. Your wife screamed for the chest with the winter clothes. You reached for it, too heavy. You had to choose. You chose the cradle. Then the roof gave in. The air turned black. Ash rained like snow. Horses panicked in the fields. Chickens ran wild, feathers scorched and useless. You covered your mouth with a rag and watched everything go. Your tools, your bedding, your grain sack, the carved spoon your grandfather made. All of it swallowed in minutes. And then the wind changed. The fire skipped the smithy, turned instead toward the baker's home. His child didn't make it out. They pulled the body from under the beam, limbs curled like charred roots. You didn't look. You couldn't. By dusk, half the village was gone. Not just burned, but erased. A blackened scar across the land. There is no fire brigade, no insurance, no refuge. You sleep that night under a cart, clutching a bundle of rags and the empty cradle. Your daughter coughs beside you, not from sickness, but from the smoke she swallowed hours ago. You stroke her hair and pretend the world hasn't changed. But you know, winter is coming, and everything you owned is ash. You borrow tools, you borrow blankets, you beg for seed, you dig holes in frozen soil and call them shelter. You build again. You must, but you never trust fire after that, not even candlelight. Because once you've seen a flame steal everything you love, even a spark feels like a monster. And you'll always wonder if you'd run faster, shouted louder, chosen better. Would it have been enough? The Lord who took what he wanted. You hear his horse long before you see his face, the crunch of hooves on gravel, the heavy snort of a well-fed animal, the clatter of armor that no one in your village has ever worn. The Lord is coming, not a visit, not a festival, no reason at all really. He's just coming. You lower your head. That's what you're meant to do. You pull your child behind you and whisper for your wife to stay inside. It won't matter, but you do it anyway, because when the Lord arrives, he doesn't ask. He takes. He rides through the village like it's his own private garden, plucking whatever he pleases. A chicken from one pen, a jug of milk from another, the youngest lamb from the shepherd's fold. There's no coin, no trade, just a look, and it's his. You remember when he took your axe, said it looked well balanced. You never saw it again. You had to fell the next tree with a rusted hatchet, nearly lost a finger. Today he takes your neighbour's daughter, 15, small, too frightened to cry. He says she'll work at the manor, says she'll be looked after. But no one believes that, not even the steward who nods silently behind him. You lock eyes with the girl's mother as she collapses to her knees in the mud. No one moves, because you can't say no. The law is him. Your body boils with something close to rage, but it's buried under hunger, exhaustion, and the dull memory of what happened to the last man who raised his voice. You watch them string him up in the square. They didn't even bury him after. You swallow the anger. You swallow everything. You return to your chores, to the illusion of life continuing, but the hole is still there. Something was taken, again and again and again, because that's how the system works. You grow the food and he eats it. You build the walls and he sleeps behind them. You give him your strength, your daughters, your loyalty, and he gives you nothing except a shadow, one that falls long over your field, your hearth, your dreams. And on days like this, it feels like that shadow might never lift. The war that wasn't yours. You don't know the reason. Something about borders, about pride, about a cousin of the king being insulted at a feast 3 counties over. Or maybe it was the bishop, or a debt unpaid. But none of that matters now, because war has come, and it's not your war. Still, they came to your village anyway, men in armour, riding fast, shouting names you don't recognise, and carrying banners stitched by hands much cleaner than yours. They didn't ask for volunteers. They never do. They took what they needed. Your oxen, your grain, your eldest son, just old enough to hold a spear, just strong enough to die in armour that doesn't fit. You stood there as they handed him a wooden shaft and told him it was honour. You watched your wife hide her tears until they were gone. Now, months later, your field lies empty. The seed never went in. The tools are rusting, and every day you look to the road, hoping he'll return, whole, or at least alive. But he doesn't. The neighbours whisper of raids, of conscripts turned to ash on foreign soil, of mass graves and wolves fed well this season. You try not to listen. And then, one morning, more men come. Different colours on their shields, different dialects in their curses. Not your soldiers, not your side. They call themselves liberators. They torch the barn, beat the elder for hiding a sack of rye. They find the baker's daughter and drag her screaming from the house. You can't stop them. You don't even try. You've seen what happens to the ones who resist. When they leave, they take everything you have. Again. And still, the war continues. Maps shift. Names change. Lords kneel, rise, fall. And in the middle of it all, you remain, digging for roots, patching holes, praying to a god who doesn't seem to hear you anymore. You don't know who's winning. You just know you're losing. Every day. The rain that drowned your harvest. It should have been a good year. Spring came early. The soil was soft. The seeds took root. For once things looked promising. Thick stalks of barley, rows of peas climbing their stakes, even the orchard showing signs of bloom. You let yourself hope. That was your first mistake, because the rain began in midsummer, and it never stopped. At first, you welcomed it, the cool relief, the patter on the roof, a blessing from the sky. But days passed, then weeks. Your fields turned to mud. Your boots sank ankle deep with every step. The barley bent under the weight of water. The wheat began to blacken at the roots. The cabbage split. You tried to dig trenches. You tried to build drainage with sticks and straw. It did nothing. The rain just laughed. The stream near your land overflowed. The bridge washed out. Pigs drowned in the sty. One of your goats vanished in the current, dragged away like it weighed nothing. The harvest day came and went, but there was nothing to gather. What wasn't rotten was mouldy. What wasn't mouldy was still green, choked by flood and rot. The apples never ripened. The potatoes turned to mush in your hands. Even the chickens began to starve, pecking at the softened husks of grain that never fully formed. You sent word to the reeve. He shrugged, said nature was cruel, said the Lord still expected his share. You had no share to give, so you offered the blanket from your bed, the knife your father left you, the last jar of lard in the root cellar. They took it all. Your wife said maybe next year would be better. Then she buried the baby, who never stopped crying after the rain started. You can't even mourn properly. The ground is too wet to hold a grave. You pile stones over the small wrapped bundle and watch the sky, hoping the clouds will break. They don't. You want to curse, to scream, but there's no one listening, only the rain, still falling, always falling, the work that broke your body. You don't remember when the pain began. Maybe it was the season you helped dig the new ditch behind the manor. Maybe it was when you lifted a barrel of salted fish and something in your back gave way. Or maybe it was just time, grinding you down one task, one step, one shovel load at a time. Either way, it's always there now. In your knees when you rise from the floor, in your wrists when you twist the scythe, in your spine where each vertebrae screams a quiet protest every time you bend to gather weeds. You are no longer a person. You are a set of worn-out tools still expected to do the work of a young man. But you're not young, and the work doesn't care. The wood still needs chopping, the hay still needs hauling, the stones still need stacking. The Lord doesn't give you fewer duties because you limp. The reeve doesn't care that you wince every time you swing the mallet. You've wrapped your joints in linen. You've rubbed nettle balm on your calves. You've tried the hot stones, the priest's blessing, even the whisper of herbs under your tongue. None of it works. Your hands don't close right anymore. Your grip slips in the cold. Your right eye blurs in the mornings, and there's a tremor in your left arm that never leaves. And still, they expect you to work, because there's no such thing as retirement. Not here, not for you. You've seen what happens to the ones who can't lift anymore. They fade. They sit too long by the fire, and one day they don't wake up. Or worse, one day they're found at the edge of the field, crumpled in the soil like broken tools left behind after harvest. You try not to think about it. You just keep moving, because if you stop, even for a day, your place is gone. Someone younger takes your spot, someone who doesn't groan getting out of bed, someone who hasn't spent a lifetime carrying the weight of a world that never noticed. So you keep carrying it, because the work doesn't stop, and neither do you, until you do. The rules that changed without warning. You wake up to shouting, not angry, not frantic, just official. The steward's voice echoes through the village square. His boots are clean, his scroll is long. He reads from it like scripture, but the words feel foreign, like they belong to someone else's world. There's a new decree. The grazing pasture you've used since you were a child. Now it belongs to the manor. By right of crown expansion, he says, which means your goats, your only wealth, have nowhere to feed. You ask what this means. He tells you to move them. Where? He doesn't answer. Tomorrow, he says, there will be a tax for cartwheels. Any wheel not registered with the reeve will be seized. You don't know what registered means. You only know your cart has 2 wheels, and without it, you can't haul timber, water, or food. And there's more. A new toll on the bridge. A new tithe for every child over the age of 7. A new curfew. A new ban on gathering near the well. A new penalty for travelling to the next village without a stamp token. Stamped with what? No one says. You want to ask questions. You want to speak. But your neighbour tried that last week. He asked why the flour tax doubled when the harvest failed. They cut his ear off in the square, said he spoke against the peace. He hasn't spoken since. So you nod. You bow your head. You shuffle back to your cottage and whisper the new rules to your wife. She adds them to the others. The list grows longer every season. You don't remember the last time you understood the laws of your own life. They change without reason, without notice. One day you're allowed to gather wood from the forest. The next, you're a thief. One day you're welcome at the chapel. The next, you're told you haven't paid the blessing fee. You used to ask why. Now you only ask when. When will it change again? When will something you depend on vanish into someone else's scroll? And when will the rule be the one you break by accident, just because you were living the same way you always have? The steward rides away. His horse kicks dust into your face. You don't wipe it off, because tomorrow there might be a tax on that too. The cold that took the old. You remember the night it came. Not with snow, there was none. Just wind. Sharp, thin wind that slid through the cracks in the walls like a thief. The fire wouldn't hold. The damp wood hissed and spat, but never caught. You burned the last of the dried cow dung by dusk. By midnight, it was just coals and prayers. Your father sat in the corner, wrapped in every rag you could find, a scarf over his mouth, blankets up to his chin, still shivering. He used to be stronger than you. You remember that. His hands were stone, his voice thunder, but now his hands are wrapped in cloth and his voice is just breath. Whispered memories, little pieces of stories you've heard 1,000 times, except now they feel like final drafts. You offered him the cot, you took the floor, you couldn't sleep. The wind howled all night like a beast just outside the door. You swear it called your name once. Maybe you dreamed that. By morning, the frost inside the cottage was thick enough to write in. Your breath hovered in the air like smoke. Your daughter curled beside you like a kitten, too cold to move. You went to check on him. You knew, before you even saw. He looked peaceful, in a way, eyes closed, face still, like he'd finally warmed up in a place your fire couldn't reach. Your wife stood beside you, silent. She didn't cry. You waited until the sun rose to bury him. The ground was hard, but not frozen. Not yet. You dug slow, your fingers numb. The shovel cracked once on a rock. You didn't curse. You just kept going. There was no priest, no hymn, just a short goodbye, just a little dirt. You marked the grave with a flat stone, no words carved into it, just wait. He's not the first to go like this. He won't be the last. Every winter takes someone, not by sword, not by sickness, just by cold, quiet, unseen, unstoppable. And next year, if it's a harder winter, if the food is shorter, the firewood scarcer, maybe it won't be the old ones. Maybe it'll be you, the dream you never got to chase. You don't remember when the dream started. Maybe it was after a good harvest, when your belly was full and the fire burned long. Maybe it was after the baby took her first steps, and you thought, for a brief, fragile moment, that the world might finally soften. You dreamed of something better, a cart of your own, a cow to give milk through winter, a patch of land you could pass down, a life where you weren't just surviving, but living. You never told anyone, not really. You mentioned the cart once to your neighbour. He laughed, not cruelly, just sadly, like he'd dreamed the same thing and buried it long ago. You told your wife you wanted to build a proper wall around the garden. She smiled, kissed your hand, but the next day she sold your spare tools to buy flour. The dream went quiet after that, because dreams are heavy, too heavy for a life like this. Every time you got close, every time you saved enough or hoped hard enough, something pulled it away. A tax, a flood, a cough in the middle of the night that turned into a funeral before morning. You once heard a traveller say that in the city, even peasants have shoes, that you could earn coin just by carrying crates, that the walls are so tall you forget the sky. You believed him, for a while. You even thought about leaving, packing up, walking south, chasing something. But then your wife grew tired, and your son needed mending, and your neighbour broke his leg in the field and someone had to cover his work. So you stayed, and the dream faded, not all at once, like smoke slipping through a crack in the roof. You tried to hold it, tried to remember the shape of it, but it always drifted just out of reach. Now you sit by the fire, what's left of it, your knees aching, your hands worn down to bone and callous, and you wonder, was the dream ever real, or just something you needed to believe in, to survive? Because in this world, in this life, hope was the most dangerous thing of all. And now, your day is done. You've walked in their shoes, mud-caked, threadbare, broken. You've bent your back under their burdens, felt their hunger, shivered through their winters, buried their dead. You've lived the life they were never allowed to escape. A life without safety nets, without justice, without choices. A life where every day was a question, will I survive? And most of them didn't. But somehow, here you are, still breathing, still warm, maybe even grateful for a pillow, for silence, for water that doesn't poison you. So tonight, as you drift off, let their stories wrap around you like a rough wool blanket, heavy, scratchy, but real, because the peasants of history didn't get monuments. They didn't leave behind great works of art or bloody legends. They left behind survival, and you felt it. If this journey brought you peace or perspective, consider leaving a like or a comment to say where you're listening from. It's strangely comforting to see people from across the world gently falling asleep to the same quiet story. Until next time, rest well and be glad you were born in another time, because back then, just making it through a single day was a miracle.